Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we've got a really crucial stack of research in front of us. We're talking about the single leading cause of death globally, coronary heart disease.
Or CHD, yeah.
That's a huge, incredibly complex topic.
Right.
But our mission today is simple. We want to cut through all the confusing advice you've heard for decades and find the most effective, evidence-based shortcuts for your heart health.
And it's so necessary to do that because the science has, it's really evolved. We've gone from one simple idea to a much more nuanced picture of how diet affects the heart.
Let's start right there with that origin story,
Oh.
because I think it explains why we've been arguing about fat for, a century now.
It really does.
The whole diet-heart hypothesis basically started back in 1908. A Russian scientist, Ignatowski, found he could give rabbits atherosclerosis hardening of the arteries just by feeding them a diet high in cholesterol and saturated fat.
And that really set the stage. For decades, saturated fat and cholesterol were seen as the villains, the only villains. And heart disease was just a plumbing problem.
A clogged pipe.
A clogged pipe, exactly. And that analogy was appealing, it was easy to grasp. But what we've learned is that that model was, it was far too simplistic. The way diet impacts CHD isn't through just one single pathway.
So it's not just about LDL cholesterol getting too high.
No, not at all. It's multifactorial. We have to consider things like systemic inflammation.
That chronic low-grade inflammatory state that damages vessels.
Precisely. And we also have to look at endothelial function, the health of the inner lining of your blood vessels, and maybe most critically, things like insulin sensitivity and thrombotic tendency.
Hold on, thrombotic tendency.
Yeah, how sticky your blood is, how prone you are to forming clots. You can increase that risk with your diet even if your cholesterol numbers look okay.
I see. So if you only focus on lowering total cholesterol, you're missing the bigger picture.
You're missing most of the picture. The true impact of what you eat is so much broader than that one number.
Okay, so when you synthesize all this evidence, the metabolic studies, the big population studies, the clinical trials, the research really points to three key actionable strategies.
Right. 3 things that are backed by compelling evidence.
First, substitute saturated and trans fats with non-hydrogenated unsaturated fats. Second, get more omega-3 fatty acids.
From fish or plants, ideally.
And third, eat a diet that's high in fruits, vegetables, nuts, and whole grains, and really low in refined grains.
And this brings us to, I think, the most crucial caveat. The one thing that completely flips the old simplistic diet advice on its head.
Which is?
Just lowering the percentage of energy you get from total fat. That's not the answer. If you don't pay attention to the type of fat or what you replace it with, you're unlikely to improve your lipid profile or reduce your risk.
So the old low fat is good mantra was just wrong.
It failed because it ignored that nuance.
Okay, let's drill down right there on the nuance of fat. We all kind of accept now that saturated fatty acids raise total and LDL cholesterol. That's solid.
It is. But the metabolic consequence of what you replace it with is everything. This is what we call the carb trap.
The carb trap.
Decades ago, the advice was reduce saturated fat. So what did people replace it with? For taste? For volume, the easiest thing was refined carbohydrates.
Hold on, I want to pause there, because this is exactly where the public health advice went sideways for 40 years. Low-fat everything. So you're saying if I replace butter with a low-fat muffin or rice or a big bowl of pasta, I didn't actually help my heart.
You likely introduced a whole new set of risks because when you replace saturated fat with carbs, yes, your LDL-C goes down, but your beneficial HDL-C also goes down proportionally.
So your ratio doesn't really get any better.
Often, no. And what's worse, that refined carb replacement sends your triglycerides way up. So the net result is you've done minimal good, maybe even made some things worse.
That completely reframes the whole debate. So if saturated fat can lead to this carb trap, where do trans fats fit on the danger scale? This is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit scary.
Trans fats are the real danger, no question.
We're talking about the stuff in partially hydrogenated oils, stick margarine, shortening, a lot of commercial baked goods, and fried foods.
They are just the worst of both worlds. Metabolic studies clearly show that trans fat raises your bad LDL-C, and at the same time, it lowers your good HDL-C. Saturated fat doesn't even do that.
So it's a double whammy.
It is. And when you look at the crucial ratio of total cholesterol to HDL, the increase caused by trans fat is approximately twice the increase caused by saturated fat.
Twice the damage. That is a powerful statistic.
It really is, and it gets worse. Beyond lipids, trans fat is just a metabolic wrecking ball. It messes with how your body uses essential fatty acids, it raises triglycerides, and this is huge. There's strong evidence linking it to increased insulin resistance.
So it promotes the risk factors for type 2 diabetes.
Exactly. It just compounds the danger. The evidence is so overwhelming that getting trans fats out of the food supply is one of the most powerful public health moves we can make.
Okay, so saturated fat is problematic, trans fats are a disaster. The solution then is substitution. Your sources are clear. Replace them with non-hydrogenated, polyunsaturated, and monounsaturated fats.
Absolutely. The Nurses' Health study showed it perfectly. Higher intakes of those beneficial fats were directly linked to a lower risk of CHD. The source of the fat is everything.
Which brings us to our second key pillar, omega-3s.
Right. And what's so fascinating about omega-3s is their protective mechanism isn't just about cholesterol. Their main benefit is that they seem to act as antiarrhythmics.
Antiarrhythmics, so they stabilize the heart's electrical rhythm.
Yes, exactly. They help prevent those dangerous, sudden, irregular heartbeats that can cause cardiac arrest. They also lower triglycerides and decrease that thrombotic tendency we mentioned.
Making the blood less sticky.
Less clot prone, yes.
The clinical trial data here is just incredibly compelling, especially for people who've already had a heart event. I'm looking at the DART trial patients were just advised to eat fish twice a week. Pretty modest change.
And the result?
A 29% lower total mortality. That's huge for a simple diet recommendation.
And if you want a real wow moment, look at the GC Prevenzione trial. Daily fish oil supplements, just 1 gram a day. They found it reduced sudden cardiac death by a massive 45%.
45%. After how long?
After only 3 months. The speed and the size of that protection is it's powerful evidence for how omega-3s stabilize the heart.
That is a staggering result. So for our listeners who might prefer plant-based sources, what's the takeaway?
The key here is alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA. It's the plant-based omega-3 you find in things like flaxseed, canola oil, soybean oil, and the data shows that ALA is also strongly and inversely associated with fatal CHD, so you can get protection from plant sources too.
Okay, let's shift gears to carbohydrates. We touched on this. Early advice was just eat more complex carbs, but now we know the quality of the carb matters way more than the quantity.
This is where we have to talk about the glycemic index, GI, and glycemic load, GL.
Right. GI is how fast a food raises your blood sugar.
But GL is the master metric. It combines that quality, the GI, with the quantity of the carbs you ate. It's such a better predictor because high GL diets are strongly linked to those adverse lipid changes, higher triglycerides and lower HDL.
So GL tells you the total metabolic strain from a meal. And when you look at grains through that lens, the difference between whole and refined is just stark.
It's night and day. Whole grains are packed with fiber, phytochemicals, essential fats. Refined grains are stripped of all that. They're mostly just rapidly digestible starch. And study after study links them to higher CHD risk.
And it seems like one component is especially protective, right?
Cereal fiber. That comes up again and again. Prospective studies consistently find that higher intake of specifically cereal fiber is linked to lower CHD risk. It shows you're getting so much more from the whole grain package.
Before we move on, what about specific micronutrients?
Yeah.
Like folate.
Folate is important. Its benefit is probably through its effect on homocysteine. High homocysteine is a risk factor, and folate helps lower it. There are even trials where folate and B vitamins significantly reduced restenosis after angioplasty.
Restenosis being the re-narrowing of the artery after they open it up.
Precisely. Folate helps keep it open.
All this evidence really brings us to the most powerful conclusion. Stop focusing on single nutrients and focus on the synergy of the whole dietary pattern.
That is where you see the truly amazing results. I mean, take the nut anomaly.
Right. For years, people were afraid of nuts because they're high in fat and calories.
But study after study shows eating more nuts is linked to lower CHD risk. Why? Because the fat is the good kind, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, which actively helps lower your bad LDL. We were scared of the calories and missed the benefit of the fat quality.
And it's the same story for fruits and vegetables. Big studies find a strong inverse link, especially for, green leafy vegetables and vitamin C-rich fruits.
Exactly those two. And interestingly, they noted that eating more potatoes, which people often lump in with vegetables, was not associated with any cardiovascular benefit.
So when you put all of these pieces together, the good fats, the whole grains, the produce, the results in clinical trials are just astonishing.
They really are. The Indian heart study put people on a semi-vegetarian diet, enriched with all those good things, and it cut coronary deaths by 41%.
And 41% is massive. But the Lion Diet Heart Study is the one that always blows my mind. They used a Mediterranean diet enriched with ALA.
And they reduced CHD death by more than 70%.
70%.
That 70% reduction is one of the most compelling findings in all of nutritional science. It just proves the power isn't in counting grams of this or that, it's in adopting a complete dietary pattern.
So let's really unpack that. The ultimate takeaway is that if you combine a healthy diet with other lifestyle factors, maintaining a healthy weight, regular exercise, not smoking, the impact is almost absolute. The Nurses' Health Study estimated that up to 82% of heart attacks in women could be prevented.
It just speaks to how much control we actually have.
So what's the bottom line for our listener? How do we boil all this down?
The core conclusion is this. You get significant protection from a diet where non-hydrogenated, unsaturated fats are your main fat, whole grains are your main carb, and you have tons of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and enough omega-3s.
And quickly on weight management, because that's tied to heart risk. What should people focus on for compliance?
Well, you have to be honest. Long-term trials show no good evidence that just reducing dietary fat helps with sustained weight loss. Excess calories make you gain weight, whether they're from fat or carbs. A diet that's moderate in healthy fats might actually be much easier for people to stick with long-term.
That makes sense. So what's still unsettled? Where is the research still focused?
Two main areas. First, the optimal balance between omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. The current thinking is not to reduce your omega-6, it has benefits too, but to substantially increase your omega-3 intake.
And the second area?
The role of individual phytochemicals and antioxidant vitamins. This one is still cloudy. For instance, even though population studies linked vitamin E to lower risk, the actual clinical trials with vitamin E supplements have been, well, a big disappointment.
They just didn't show the protective effect.
No, they didn't.
And that leads us perfectly to our final provocative thought for you to explore. Considering the dramatic success of the whole diet trials, like that stunning 70% reduction in the Lion study versus the disappointing results from single nutrient trials, like vitamin E, does this suggest that the real protective power of diet lies less in individual isolated molecules and more in the complex, beautiful synergy of thousands of compounds found only in whole foods? Something to chew on until our next deep dive.